Welcome, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach with Maine Woodland Owners. Maine Woodland Owners is a member organization based in Augusta, providing resources and advice to woodland owners in the state, small woodland owners primarily. And we once again have the pleasure of hosting these online programs with our various experts in the field. Today we have Dan Jacobs. He's a forester with the Maine Forest Service. He had previously been, or he sort of still is, the district forester for the Southern and Aroostook County area. He is also now he's taking on a new position in the regulatory division of Maine Forest Service, and we'll have a new district forester for his region soon enough. Dan has also been awarded the Forester of the Year in 2021 by the Maine Forest Products Council. So that was very exciting. And he has been a true advocate for woodland owners, supporting their efforts to manage their woods in a way that's at a high quality, and making sure that the natural resources on the property are protected and well managed as well. So we have also had the pleasure of Dan's writing. As you saw, I sent out links to his articles. He writes for our newsletter around issues of water quality protection and forest management. And we got talking last year about how great these articles are and how much of a resource they are for people who read our newsletter. And I thought, gee, it'd be great to have a program around what he was speaking about in these articles, and give our readers, our members, our supporters a chance to interact with Dan a little bit and ask some questions that you might have about his recommendations for best management practices. So that's what today is. We have an hour-long program ready to go. And then there will be time at the end for some Q&A. I do encourage people to send questions in the chat box as the program's going on, and there will be chances for me to stop and read those questions. Also, if you would like to ask a question during the program for clarification purposes, or if you have, you just needed to get a little bit more information, you may go ahead and unmute yourself and maybe jump in or turn on your video and raise your hand. I will be monitoring everybody's activity so I can see if anybody's got any questions. But I do recommend you if you can send the question on the chat, that's actually more efficient. We want to get as much information out to people as possible during this hour. So Dan, I'm going to pass it over to you. If you actually go ahead and talk a little bit more. I didn't do a great job talking about your current job, your current position. So if you wanted to mention a little bit about what you're doing now, and then please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Yes, fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Dan Jacobs. I work for the Maine Forest Service. For 21 years, I was a district forester covering primarily Southern Aroostook. Recently took the position of regional enforcement coordinator for the northern third or so of the state. And late this fall, Jen asked me if I wanted to do a presentation on BMPs, and I agreed. And I always enjoy coming and speaking to Maine woodland owners as a group. So this presentation, it's about maybe 30 minutes long. Like Jen said, if you want to type questions into chat, that works. I think I'd prefer if you hold verbal questions until the end and just save them until we should have about a half an hour at the end for me to speak and answer questions. So as Jen mentioned, this presentation is on BMPs to protect water quality. Initially, I was asked to focus on the articles that I wrote over 2020 and 2021. And I didn't exactly do that. I wanted to get a little bit more general and not try to do a big overview on all the articles. So this presentation will tie into the articles and relate to them, but it won't be sort of an overview or a summary of the articles. So this is the topics I want to cover, probably several slides per topic. We're not going to get really deep into any one area, but I thought these were probably some very relevant things to at least start the discussion about with this group. So for folks that don't have a lot of experience in forest management, I thought to start, we just introduce BMPs and talk about what BMPs are in a very general sense. Then I just want to introduce the Forest Service BMP manual. I'll take just a couple slides to do that. But this is such a great document that I think it's deserving of being included in the presentation, and it ties into what we're talking about very well. Then I'm going to focus on two important BMP fundamentals. And fundamentals, oftentimes I use the word principles interchangeably with that. But these are sort of the building blocks for what we do to protect water quality. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So BMPs, what are we talking about? BMPs are best management practices. And in a forestry context, we're talking about all the things, the methods, the techniques, the structures and systems that we use to protect water quality. And we usually break this down into kind of two pieces, what we do to protect water quality on our access roads and what we do in the woods to protect water quality. I'm going to say this multiple times while I go through these slides. BMPs are not the same as regulations. Maine has a number of regulations in terms of the protection of water resources, and they're not the same as BMPs. As you'll see as we go through this, BMPs can help you comply with the regulations, but they're not the same thing. So the first time I heard the term BMPs was probably sometime in the 90s. And since then, it's more than a buzzword now. It's part of the forestry vocabulary and language at this point. So anybody that's been working in forestry for more than a couple of years is very familiar with this term. These are some of the topics that I covered. Well, they're all the topics that I covered in my articles from 2020 to 2021. They all had some relation to the protection of water quality and BMPs. The topics, I tried to make them kind of diverse to keep it interesting for readers. And this was a fun thing to be involved with because after every article, I would get one or two phone calls, and the comments were usually fairly positive. I usually got into some pretty good discussions with people, and sometimes folks even provided me with future topics, ideas for future topics. So it was a fun process to be involved in writing these articles. And I will be happy at the end if you have a question about one of the articles. I can do my best to answer it. But I'm not going to go too much deeper into the articles than this, just providing the list of topics. But what I talk about from here on out is going to tie directly in some way to these different topics. So this slide from a different presentation. It's actually from a big BMP program that the Forest Service puts on. And it just seemed to fit so well into this talk that I just stole it. So the formatting's not the same as everything else, but I think we can live with it. Why are BMPs important? Well, this is kind of intuitive and we already know it, but it might be worth just going through the list real quick. Water quality is critical for human health. That's kind of a no-brainer. The forestry exemption, that might be new to some people, and I don't want to get way into the weeds on this, but it's pretty relevant forest management. So there is no requirement for federal permitting for forestry operations. Forestry is to an extent exempt from that type of a permitting process under the Clean Water Act, and we want to keep that exemption. So in order to do that, it's important for us to protect water quality on forestry operations and to use BMPs. And by doing that, hopefully we can keep that exemption, which is very beneficial to the forest products industry and family woodland owners. So the next bullet point is Maine's reputation. Maine is known for open spaces, for a beautiful outdoors, for recreational opportunities, and that great reputation is something to be proud of and something we want to maintain. Recreation and tourism, these are important from an economic standpoint, and Maine is known for having fantastic fisheries, especially brook trout fisheries. BMPs are critical to keeping those productive and healthy. And if we do that, we will have an economic benefit from people coming here to fish and recreate, canoe and kayak. We don't talk about this next bullet point enough. I think it deserves a little more attention sometimes, but implementing BMPs can save you money. Basically, if you build it right, take for instance a truck road for hauling wood. If you build it right, it will last longer and require less maintenance. And BMPs can be a big part of that, helping to protect your investment. So there's a lot of connection between using BMPs properly and good aesthetics. And aesthetics, I know, to family woodland owners is often very important. And there's a pretty strong connection between the two. And I think a lot of it goes back to just quality work. Family woodland owners are interested in having a quality job done, and BMPs are a big part of that. And finally, BMPs are important because protecting water quality is the law. You are not allowed to get, by law, mud in the water when you're doing forestry work. So BMPs can help you meet this standard and comply with the law. But again, I've got to say that there's no substitute for knowing the regulations when you're doing forestry work. BMPs are not the same as the regulations. So here's another stolen slide. I only stole half of it, really. The picture is something that I added. This is, the first two of these are kind of a no-brainer. What water resources are we looking to protect by implementing BMPs? Streams and rivers, that's pretty obvious. Lakes and ponds, also very obvious that we want to protect those resources. Ephemeral, that's a term that many have heard before, some people may not have. And these are areas that don't really have a defined stream channel, but water does flow through these areas certain times of the year, like spring runoff. And these are often very important to protect as well. Vernal pools, we have done many workshops just on vernal pools, so it's a really big topic in itself. We could spend a lot of time on it. If you don't know what these are, they're pools that are temporary. They are containing water in the spring and dry up in the summer. They are breeding grounds for amphibians, and they're very ecologically important. So vernal pools are something we want to protect. Obviously, wetlands are resources we want to protect. And groundwater, something, again, we don't think of a lot, but in the area where I work, there's a lot of hills that have springs and seeps. And if you operate on those hillsides the wrong time of year, you can cut into those groundwater resources and create quite a mess. So being aware of those and protecting those is important as well. This picture here was one I took that looks like in 2019, and that was somewhere between north of Millinocket and south of Baxter Park. And there was harvesting on either side of that stream, but they left a really nice buffer on both sides of that brook, kept it well shaded, well protected. So they did a very good job protecting that resource. So now is my real quick intro to the Forest Service BMP manual. And this is kind of a plug for one of our publications, but it ties into what we're talking about perfectly. So I'm just going to say a few words about this. This publication first came out in 2004. To say it's groundbreaking, it might be a little bit strong, but it was a pretty new approach at the time to addressing BMPs. It was so effective, in fact, that a number of other states copied the format. And I'll tell you a little bit more in the next slide about why it was so unusual and new and groundbreaking. I would go to bullet point number 2 first, because to me, that's the most important part about the book. The book is, I call it a toolbox. It gives you a whole set of tools to use. And really, it doesn't tell you how to use them, which tools to use, and what order to use them in. You decide that. The outcome is the most important thing. And the outcome in this case is clean water. So the book is the toolbox. You pick the tools, and all we're trying to get you to do is protect water quality and ensure that the water stays clean and the resource is protected. So that's why this book was so unusual at the time it came out. I'll skip to the last bullet point. I don't know why I'm going out of order, but I figured I'd mix it up a little bit. The book, if you follow the book and you do what's necessary to protect water quality and protect water bodies, you should be above the regulatory safety net. Now, you always have to understand the regulations and know the regulations where you're working. But in a general sense, if you use BMPs to protect water quality, you should be operating above the safety net. So the principles, which is in red on this slide, is the next thing that I'm going to talk about with probably 6 or 7 slides. And the principles are sort of the foundation of the book. And everything that follows the principles in the book is built upon the principles. And there's 7 principles. I'm going to focus on just a couple of those today to talk about, because I feel they're most relevant to the family woodland owner. In the way that I usually describe the principles, which I also sometimes call the fundamentals, are when I was in forestry school, we had to take a number of silviculture classes. The first silviculture class that you took was the principles of silviculture. The silviculture classes you took after that were the practice of silviculture. And so one would build on the other. You did not take the class on practices until you understood the principles behind the practices. And so the BMP book is set up in a very similar way. It starts out with the principles. These are the 7 principles. I'm not going to read through all of these. I think you guys can read this on your own, but the two in red are the two that I want to focus on, and I'm going to devote a few slides to each one. These are the ones I feel are very pertinent to the family woodland owners, and that is fundamental number 1, define objectives and responsibilities, and fundamental number 6, which is protect the integrity of water bodies. Now, all the principles are important, but for today, those are just 2 areas where I want to kind of focus. So principle number 1, define objectives and responsibilities. Again, I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to skip right to the bottom, get right to the good stuff. I call this the communication fundamental or communication principle. Good communication is key to having a good outcome on your forestry operation. So I know that there's a lot of woodland owners that do their own work. They will do their own harvesting. They plan things out on their own. But there is also a great number of woodland owners that work with licensed foresters and have professional loggers do the harvesting and operations. So in those instances, it's critical when there's a number of people that are involved in forest management, a landowner, a forester, a logger. There has to be good communication to effectively implement the plan, meet the landowner's objectives, and in what we're talking about today, protect water quality. So through all of that communication, responsibilities for BMPs need to be assigned. So I guess an example would be if there's a forester involved and there's a stream, the forester may flag the stream buffer, but he needs to communicate what the flagging means to the logger so that the logger can implement the harvest the way the forester is intending. So that communication is key. If the logger accidentally goes across the flagging and too close to the stream because the communication wasn't there, that's a bad outcome. So good communication is very important to successful operations and implementing BMPs. We've had a BMP monitoring program in the state of Maine for over 20 years. We go to about 100 harvest operations every year and assess BMP effectiveness. And one of the pieces of information that we've gathered sort of anecdotally through that process is that when there is no assigned responsibility for BMPs, it's more likely that you're going to have an erosion and sedimentation issue on the job. So having clearly defined responsibilities is critical. And I know that Maine woodland owners, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have sample timber sale agreements or sample contracts. And it's very typical of these to have the assignment of the BMPs written directly into them, who is responsible. So this is just a very important topic, and I think it's important for all family woodland owners to understand. Here's a few examples. This picture, I think, may have come from a large logging contractor in the Lincoln area that has been very good about supplying me with pictures and information over the years. But in terms of good communication, landowners really need to be clear on their objectives when they're discussing their woodland with a forester. And these objectives need to get communicated all the way on down the line. So I've had discussions this fall with landowners, talking with logging contractors about forest access roads and stream crossings, and making the decision as to whether they should be permanent or temporary. So like this picture on the right-hand side, we have a skid trail and a temporary crossing. You can see bridge mats. These timber mats are laid on top of other timber mats, sort of as abutments. And so that's a temporary crossing on a skid trail. But if the landowner really wants an access road onto his property instead of this skid trail, then they would need a permanent crossing. So that's something that has to get communicated, planned out, and it just has to be something that's discussed thoroughly. Another thing that we see every once in a while is a woodland owner that wants to reuse a skid trail, a specific skid trail for recreational activities, whether it's walking or skiing or something like that. And one of the BMPs that's very effective that we have, a lot of loggers use this all the time, is putting brush in trails to, one, reduce impact, and two, to stabilize soil. Now, if the wishes of the landowner are not communicated in terms of reusing that trail, a trail that is packed full of brush and slash is not going to be a very good walking path. So sometimes these things can be talked about in advance and taken into consideration during the harvest.
Dan, can I jump in? Can I ask
Yeah.
a quick question? Someone asked, does the term buffer imply no cut, or is management of that riparian, or is it management of that riparian area?
Could be either. So that would be something, there's a lot of considerations here. You have the regulations, you have the objectives of the landowner, and you also have, depending on the ownership size, you could have a company policy to all dictating certain constraints within that area. But typically, there is some kind of management within the buffer. It doesn't necessarily mean no cut. On a lot of land ownerships, I see that the forester will put in a flag line near a brook. There will be no equipment allowed beyond that point, but the logging professional can harvest some of the trees over the line, just not bringing equipment over the line. So there's a lot of things that come into play, but buffer does not necessarily mean no cut.
Great, thanks. Also,
Yeah.
you mentioned a timber sale agreement sample that
Yeah.
we might have. I'm going to put a link to that document so everybody has access to that. It's on our website.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
So, and another thing too, since we're talking about buffers, is a buffer may be required from a regulatory standpoint on a water body, and it may only be required to be a fairly narrow buffer. If the landowner is very interested in wildlife and maintaining dense quarters for wildlife travel and use, then maybe that buffer should be wider. And that would have to be communicated. So there would still be a buffer to protect water quality, but maybe it would be enhanced and be a little bit wider than normal to be adequate for wildlife. So communication is key. The second fundamental that I want to talk about in this presentation is BMP Fundamental number 6, which is protect the integrity of water bodies. This should be a real easy one for everybody to get their head around. A lot of my articles had some kind of emphasis on stream crossings, whether permanent or temporary. And so this kind of links into those articles fairly well. It's important during forestry operations, timber harvesting, to protect the stream channels and banks, or the banks of ponds and lakes. So in terms of stream channels, if you have damaged banks, they can erode quickly. And damaged channels can also prevent proper fish passage. So not damaging channels and banks is an important BMP. Shoreland vegetation is also critical. Shoreland vegetation provides shade to the water, keeps it cool, and shoreline vegetation also reduces erosion. So these are all components of protecting the integrity of water bodies. And size crossings appropriately. Crossings that are undersized, especially permanent crossings, you can have accelerated erosion. You can have these scour pools that occur at the outlet, and then resulting in hung culverts. You can also have inadequate fish passage if the velocity of water through a small culvert is too great, difficult for fish to pass. So sizing crossings appropriately is critical. So this fundamental or principle is protecting the integrity of water bodies, and I've got a couple pictures to go along with this. These pictures are out of a bigger BMP presentation that the Forest Service has on file, but they're really good pictures. They are of a steel bridge that's being used in Hancock County. You can see the picture on the left, the forwarder going across the bridge. So this was done in the wintertime on frozen ground. The steel bridge goes beyond the banks on either side. It's above the channel. It's a good crossing. In fact, what I was told is when this crossing was pulled out, some of those alders on the banks even popped back up. So they did very little damage to that stream or the banks when they went across it. They did a good job. In this, on the right-hand side, I believe this is the same crossing, even though the way that it's oriented, it looks a little bit shorter than it should. But in this picture, you can see that what we call corduroy and slash or brush was used on the approaches to this crossing. And so that will, one, help to lock in that bridge panel or the bridge panels, but two, it also protects the banks of the stream and the approaches from damage as machines are going onto and off of the bridge. So that's a very good BMP to protect the integrity of water bodies. And these would be what we consider temporary crossings. These are structures that are in skid trails, and they will come out when the harvest is completed. Now going to a couple of pictures of haul roads and stream crossings. These are what we consider permanent crossings. These are going to be in place for a long period of time. And so on the left-hand side, you can see a crossing that was sized appropriately, and it was armored very well, meaning that there's rocks in place to prevent any erosion into that stream. So a crossing like this is going to allow high flows of water. It allows for fish passage. They don't need as much maintenance as an undersized crossing, and they're going to last a long time. So there's a lot of benefits to this kind of crossing. Now, of course, this crossing costs some money to build, but it's going to last and it's going to protect the resource. The crossing on the right-hand side is a culvert crossing, and it's undersized. It's probably not legal, but it's obstructing fish passage. So there could be a velocity barrier at times of the year to fish passage, but you can also see that that culvert is perched. So that's very difficult for fish to go through. And also there's very little water in the culvert because it's perched. There's probably even water flowing under the culvert. So these structures are, when they're undersized like this, they're high maintenance. You can see that there's not a gradual slope on the material that's over the culvert. So there's going to be some erosion going into the channel, sediment going into the channel. But this is having a negative impact on fish passage and on water quality. This is what we want to try to avoid. So one more little plug for the BMP manual that we put out. Stream Smart Crossings. Now there's a whole program designed around Stream Smart Crossings, and it's called Stream Smart, and it's put on by Maine Audubon. You can go to the Maine Audubon website and find out when they're holding programs and workshops on Stream Smart. But the whole idea behind Stream Smart in one short kind of catchphrase is allow a stream to act like a stream. So you want to design and build a crossing that allows your stream to continue to operate the way that it would without a crossing. And they, through that Stream Smart program at Maine Audubon, they take you through step by step why this is important and how to do it, how to do these crossings. And there's quite a lot to it, but it's a really good program. So there is, I'd say, 3 pages in the Maine Forest Service BMP manual that are dedicated to fish passage and Stream Smart crossings. If anybody wants a manual, you can download it at the Forest Service website. You can also get in touch with your local district forester, and they can get you a copy. And you could probably call Augusta. I don't know. It's possible if they ship one to you, they might charge you a small shipping fee. But there are ways to get this for free. And for the small woodland owner, family woodland owner, it's a very good resource. I think we're just about on my last slide here. Yeah, so this is a picture I took in, I think it was in Grindstone on a large landowner. And they were apparently trying, I was actually doing a BMP assessment there. So this is right near a stream crossing. And they had a CB handset that was for sale. So you never know what you're going to find in the North Maine woods. When I was there, my CB was working properly, and I didn't need a new mic or handset. So I left it there. But if anybody wants to go there and pay $1, I can let you know where that location is. So catch up to me after the talk. And now I'll take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Dan. You threw out a few really good resources, names of resources. Stream Smart is one of them. I just quickly went on the Maine Forest Service website. I don't see the guide there to download. Is it somewhere in, specific? Because I could put the link here so people could access that while they're on this call.
Yeah, if you go to the Maine Forest Service website, there is a publications page, and it should be under the list of featured publications.
Okay, I'll get that up on the chat so everybody has access to it easily. And then I'll have it on our website as well. Gosh, maybe I do already have it on there. So I'll make sure people are connected to that. We did get a question from Dave asking, he says, my woods is for conservation and wildlife enhancement. Harvests are only over frozen ground with a minimum of foot of snow cover. The access road is also a state snowmobile trail that I permit. Are there special winter BMPs?
Well, oftentimes operating in the winter is a recommended BMP. So one thing I would be careful of in the winter is not being able, if doing the layout when there's no snow on the ground can be very important, because with snow on the ground, you can miss a lot of things. You can miss vernal pools, you can miss ephemeral streams, you can miss smaller intermittent stream channels. So when you're doing, preparing to do a harvest, I would not wait to do the layout until you have a foot of snow. I would do the layout and identify those sensitive features and water bodies. I would identify them without snow on the ground. So, but oftentimes we consider winter harvesting to be a BMP because you're operating on frozen ground and there's less chance of doing damage to the resource.
I'm posting best management practices for forestry, protecting Maine's water quality, 3rd edition publication on chat right here for everybody. That's basically your go-to when you discuss this type of thing. Is that right, Dan?
That in the state of Maine, that's the go-to BMP manual.
Okay.
That's right.
Yep, so it's there. Great, thank you. There was another question. Who is the regional enforcement coordinator for Milford and Bradley? That can be actually discovered through the Maine Forest Service's District Forester page. And I will post that as well. That's a great tool to have because you can basically type in the name of your town, and then it will list the district forester for that particular town and all the towns that they work in. So I will post that. But Dan, do you happen to know that answer off the top of your head?
No, I don't. Were they asking for the regional enforcement coordinator or the district forester?
I'm sorry, it was the regional enforcement coordinator. Sorry, I got district forester in my head. Do you know that? Milford and Bradley.
Well, I know there's only 3 of us, and I know it's not me. That may be the best answer I can give you, but that information is on the website. I did also see Mort's name on the list of attendees, Mort Mosswild. So if he wants to chime in or enter and chat who it is, he could do that. It's either going to be Terry Coulong or Adam Cates.
Is there a kind of one number or one place to go to kind of get that type of answer for regarding the regional enforcement coordinator?
Yeah, the Maine Forest Service website. And there is a page for rules and regulations. So all these different pages, kind of a left-hand margin on the Maine Forest Service's homepage. And all these different things like water resources, publications, and rules and regulations are tabs in that margin.
Someone says it's probably Terry. Her name's Terry Coulong. That's great. She's actually one of our board members for our organization. So she's great. I am gonna, sorry to keep flooding the chats with these links, but they're really good resources related to what you've talked about. So I've just posted the rules and regulations page on the Maine Forest Service website. With the warming climate, how dependable are frozen conditions?
Well, I'll tell you, last winter I was doing a harvest on my property, and somehow I timed things perfectly. You would think in Aroostook County that by the end of December you cut wood in a swamp, but it was not the case last year. And fortunately, my harvest started the first week in February, and I think that was the only below 0 temperatures that we had. And I was cutting in a cedar swamp. So the weather has just been so variable. The year before, we had snow from October until May. Last winter, we didn't have much snow. It snowed late, and the freezing conditions just weren't there. So last winter was a very tough winter. And I just think it's important to be prepared for just about anything these days. The weather just seems so variable.
Mort, I posted his phone number. Mort, did you want to chime in?
Sure, that's just the Maine Forest Service headquarters office. You'll talk to one of several folks who answers the phone in Augusta, but certainly if you can't find what you need on the website, you can always call that number and say, hey, who's the district forester for such and such an area, or find other resources. They'll be happy to help you.
Thank you. Mort, can you tell us your title, your official title?
Sure, I'm the field team leader for the field team, basically the field foresters, district foresters, and regional enforcement coordinators from the Forest Policy and Management Division.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
Who else has got a question? Jump in, unmute yourself and go for it.
I have somewhat on topic, I hope. I have a situation where there is a state road going at the top of my property that is on a slope and hill. The culvert or culverts that are there are undersized. And so in the spring in southwestern Maine, we have fire hose culverts, and they really are blasting away the sides of the stream and what, you know, the runoff that goes through, and it is right on the edge of my property. Luckily, it's my brother on the other side. But I was wondering, is there any recommended way to get the state interested? Because obviously it's going to cost money if they put in a proper culvert. That should have been done probably 50 years ago, and this land has been in the family for a couple hundred years anyway. So, you know, I understand budgets and all of this stuff, and I hate to see destruction being done to a waterway, and there's really nothing I can do about it. As the land, it's my land that's getting negatively impacted, but everything downstream for me is too. And a lot of it could be rectified by changing the culvert system going under the road.
Well, this will be just from my own personal experience. This isn't really an official answer or anything like that, but I've dealt with DOT a number of times for my property. And when I have had trouble getting a response, I emailed the Augusta office directly, and they're on it the next day. So someone in Augusta pays attention to the emails and takes them seriously. And that's how I've gotten the best response. And I don't know if I've just been lucky in my emails going to the right person, but I've had a bunch of beaver issues at my place, and I've had trappers trapping beaver for years. And I've got a state road that runs down the length of my property. And that has been the one way that has really seemed to get DOT's attention, is contacting Augusta.
Right. There was someone put a question up about any suggestions on finding a reputable low impact forester in the Norwich Walk area. Thoughts about that? Oh,
Well,
you could plug Woodwise.
Well, I'll just plug our forester in Norwich Walk. So starting with the district foresters is a great way to get going with forest management, with land management, and they probably won't recommend a specific forester or logger, but they can give you lists. We do have a list of foresters that's statewide on our website. It's called the Stewardship Forester List, and it's on the Woodswise Incentives for Landowners page. Now, the only issue I have with that list, it's a great list, but it's statewide. So your district forester may be able to help you narrow it down and give you some leads. I don't think that they're going to give you like a short list of a few names, but that's kind of on the district forester, I guess, will work with you on that and help you narrow down the list. But I would get in touch with Norwich Walk. I'm hoping I'm right on this. Is Julie Davenport.
I think that's right.
Yep. And so you can go to the Maine Forest Service website and the district forester map and find out exactly who it is and get their number and information.
Yeah, for the people who are new to woodland ownership, people will call our office sometimes. We may be their first phone call, and our first suggestion is to call their district forester. Now that you have a full complement of, well, you did until Dan has moved to his new position, so now we have another vacancy, but that's going to get filled pretty quickly. And utilizing these foresters, these district foresters, is important because they want to know, they want time on people's properties. It's a real opportunity for them, and they are really useful with information, and they can help you kind of launch off into next steps, and certainly can guide you to find a good fit for your consulting forester.
If I could jump in there on that too, for Dick, per Dan's earlier conversation, I was in exactly the same situation where, because I can't be at the property for large periods of time, I needed a good consulting forester who would align with my very specific desires for the property, as you know, the same property generation after generation after generation. And in talking with the district foresters, communicating that to the district forester, and I actually spoke with two because I'm right on a border between two different regions, they actually did narrow down that big list and say, hey, you know, talking to you, I think these guys are, you know, this person, this person, this person are going to be most aligned with your point of view and your approach to what you're trying to do on the land. So it was extremely helpful. One of the district foresters came out to look, narrowed down the list for me somewhat, and it turned out very, very positive. I've been very pleased with the consulting forester that I got, and it really was facilitated by them listening to what my specific desires and needs were. So to Dan's point about communication is key, really did come into play there.
Thanks for
yeah,
telling me that story. Go ahead, Nick.
yeah, thanks. I haven't done any logging with a logger on this property probably in, well, it's pushing 35, 40 years. I do on my own generally. And I do know Julie Davenport. I have was she working? Did she just recently take that position?
October of 2019. Actually, we did a little profile of her in our newsletter, in our January newsletter.
Yeah, I thought she worked for SAPI.
Yep, she did for a bit.
Yes, okay. So I do know her, and I'm thinking about doing some logging with a logger, and I just haven't gotten to that point yet because I don't like anybody else on my property, to tell you the truth. And I only have about 90 acres, but I try to keep it to myself. But yeah, I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Good. Someone earlier had asked, could Dan explain a little bit about the Clean Water Act? Maybe as it relates to this. Yeah,
I didn't really want to get into the weeds on this, just because it was kind of a side note to what we were talking about with BMPs. But the Clean Water Act does have a number of implications at the state level. So, and I just want to say that I might not be 100% correct on this, but I think that some of the requirements of the Clean Water Act that impact the state are the states are required to have BMP manuals. The states are required to do reporting on how water quality is being protected in different sectors like forestry operations and the forest products industry. And with the Clean Water Act, there is no federal permitting system required for, say, stream crossings that are associated with forestry operations. There's a forestry exemption to a federal permit process. So in other industries, there may be a federal permit required, but for forestry, in these situations, there's not. And so the permitting is allowed to be done at the state level. So we have things like the permit by rule process and forest operations permits that are done at the state level. And in a lot of cases with our permitting systems through the state, the processing time is pretty quick and it's pretty efficient. And so that's something that we want to maintain. Now, this forestry exemption, or so it's called, has been challenged in court, I believe, on the West Coast. And I'm not the best person to speak about this, but I'm giving it my best shot. So I know that it has been challenged in court. I know that it has been upheld and maintained. But an important component of us being able to keep that exemption is to continue to do a good job protecting water quality in forestry operations. So continue to use BMPs effectively and protect water quality is going to be key to keeping that exemption.
Great. And Mort's posted a link for the Maine Forest Services on selecting consulting foresters. That's great. Dave asked, is there a BMP to transfer sheet flow from a hillside across an access road? The pond is literally 5 feet on the other side of the road without action, no foot or wheeled access during the mud season.
I'm kind of having trouble getting my head around that to visualize it, but I'm thinking it sounds like he needs a cross drainage culvert in his road to carry water from one side of the road to the other. But I'm kind of having trouble picturing exactly what's going on. So maybe if he wants to give me a call after this is over, that would be fine.
So I'll post your email. Is email also a good way to reach out to you?
Yeah, email's the best. I'd be happy to
Okay.
talk further by email or even by phone if need be.
Okay, I'll post that as well. On our chat. Yeah, one thing I'm noticing about Maine is that it's a small enough state. I mean, it's geographically large, but as far as resources available, it has kind of a small town feel, and it doesn't take too many phone calls to find the right person and getting the information that you need, if it's there. Who's got another question? We've got, oh, we're actually at 1:02. But is there any last minute questions for anybody? Let me get Dan's email up. Dan, and also can you share your phone number and I can get that on there as well?
Do you want me to type it into chat?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Why don't you do your email and phone number on chat? We'll leave that up for a minute or two. And make sure it goes to everyone. I made that mistake. I did not get it to everyone. Mine links to everyone initially. You know how to do that?
I think it is going to go to everyone.
Okay. I see it. Okay, there it
Okay.
is.
Perfect.
Or give our office a call as well. We always like to be available to people. Often it's just that, you know, Tom Doak in our office is a forester. Harold Burnett is our land trust forester. He's happy to talk to anybody about questions. But a lot of times we just, you know, direct them to a state, a state resource, you know, because we have them available, and it's a good thing. So here's our phone number if anybody needs to make a call to us. And we will have more of these types of programs this year. Just to put a plug in for our next presentation, we have our annual meeting and forestry forum being held on Wednesday, January 12th. So it's this next Wednesday, and it's an all-day program. And we have a website, a webpage that has all the information. Our agenda starts at 8 o'clock with a business meeting for members. And then we'll get into our programming at 9, and it will go through till around 3 o'clock. So we have some really good topics around the wood markets, wildlife management on forest property for private landowners. We have an update from the invasive bugs and disease folks in the Maine Forest Service. And we're also going to talk about carbon credits. So I know that that's on a lot of people's minds. So check our website, mainewoodlandowners.org, and you'll find all the links to get to the annual meeting information. We also have our silent auction starting tomorrow at noon. So if you wanted to participate in that, you can start bidding once that opens at noon, and it will go until just after the annual meeting is over, forest reform is over. It will close at 4 o'clock on the 12th. So unless there's any other last minute questions or thoughts, I'm gonna tell everybody goodbye. Thank you very much for being part of this. Dan, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. And please, drop us a line if you have any questions, and reach out to Dan and Mort or the Augusta office, the information that Mort posted as well. And appreciate everybody's interest in this. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the week and good weekend coming up. So everybody take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you.
Bye, Dan.